must have witnessed celebrities wearing peculiar and crazy outfits that are weird enough to shock you. Lady Gaga's meat dress is one of the weird apparel examples. Oversized hat of Pharrell Williams, Madonna's bullet bra, and scary mouse leotard and weird hairstyle of Miley Cyrus seem to be unusual too. Not many of such weird and crazy fashions become trends. The above mentioned weird fashion forms are of latest era. But in history there were many unusual and peculiar fashion trends that were worth mentioning here. People now are derived by both comfort and style, but it was not the case in past. Centuries ago, people used to put immense amount of effort in order to grab attention by adopting a crazy and weird getup. For wealthy people of that time, showing off or boosting their wealth by creating crazy apparels was a good time pass. Let us look into the details of some crazy and weirdest fashion from Georgian England to Egypt. These sounds like Disney and were in for quite a long time from 15th to 19th century. These were a type of undergarments made of wire cage or heavy clothing to keep the typical effects of tiny waist and large bottom. Hoop skirts were heavy and uncomfortable to carry and were impractical. Their weight could damage the top of hip area on where they rested. Women who used to wear these heavy hoop skirts were unable to sit and walk through the small passages. Their daily businesses were halted due to those heavy cages. This was a deadly fashion trend though. Bilots were in trend from 11th to 13th century, and these dresses were a fashion signature in the medieval Europe. Bilot was a kind of dress that had long bell-like sleeves dangling on the floor. Royal women of Ottoman Empire used to wear bilots. It was used to illustrate the elite class of that era and to tell people that those women were too important to perform any chore with hands. Women who were bilot were unable to do anything without getting bothered and were only confined to move their hands delicately. This was again an impractical and silly fashion trend to follow and hence was stopped. A latest version of those sleeves came back around 20th century. Those sleeves were not floor long length. Moving on to Egypt. A very strange fashion was observed from the archaeological evidences. Egyptian women used to wear cones on the top of their head. Cones were made of wax or fat and were a party wear. Men, including servants, also used to wear those cones to the parties and were perfumed. Those used to melt slowly over the time of parties. It was quite weird, and you certainly cannot think of putting a drippy mess of wax or fat on your head. Royal Highness of France Louis XI started a fashion in 17th century to cover his baldness. After that trend, enormous wigs took place and their heights reached dangerous heights. They were vulnerable to fire as well as in the start of 18th century. Men used to whiten their wigs with powder and after tax imposition and French Revolution was crazy, fashion came to an end. Crocos were extravagant, shoes worn by both men and women. Crocos had whale bones or strings inserted in their tips and were tied to the knees in order to make walking possible. English king and pope tried to ban those silly and impractical shoes version. Corsets do exist even today in the form of body shapers. Hence, calling them a crazy fashion is a bit unfair. Many Victorian women went over to top to achieve smallest of waist and ended up in breaking their ribs, suffocation and fainting. Not only this, but those tightly laced corsets did extreme damage to the women who went extravagantly crazy over the hourglass figure. It was a pretty crazy and weird fashion trend. It was dated back to 17th and 18th century when plague doctors were named as quakes because they used to wear a beak-like mask filled with perfume. They did so to get protected from the germs and bad odor. Their outfit was pretty scary and crazy enough to scare patients. Wife of King Edward VII, named Alexandra, was very fashionable and beautiful that she became the fashion icon for women all over England. Women copied her every style and dresses. She then faced complication in her childbirth and a limp were left over that hobbled her walk. Women followed that crazy thing too and developed the same hobble in their walk. Now this was pretty crazy. This crazy fashion remained in trend for a very long time. Ancient Greeks were highly involved in this fashion and it ended in the 19th century finally. Lead is extremely toxic, and this lead makeup trend was responsible for killing many people in order to seek pale skin. Elizabeth I, they started this weird and crazy trend of painting her face to conceal smallpox blemish on her face. She used white lead with vinegar to paint her face pale, white and ended up into poisoning herself over time. People used similar dangerous combination and methods to paint their face white.